it really affected my family in the sense of, there's already a high divorce rate in the military. There's a high marriage rate, but there's also a high divorce rate in the military. But we succumbed to that, just because of I wasn't there for my son's birth. I had to get flown back a couple of times actually, because when my son was in the hospital, I had to do the whole Red Cross thing on one of my deployments and, kind of come back a little early. First one I couldn't because my son was born 3 days after George Bush declared war. And so they were telling me the whole time, like, hey, you're going to be able to go home. You're going to be able to go and see your son. And it just didn't happen. And so it kind of deteriorated my marriage from that point, just because there's a lot of bitterness there. And I know that it wasn't necessarily my fault or her fault or anything like that, but there was a lot of bitterness, there was resentment. We were young, as I said, and so it was hard to deal with that kind of stuff.
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast of military and veterans who refuse to be silenced. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, provide value and solutions, and to change the culture when it comes to mental health within the DoD organizations. Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Today's guest is Dwyan Marsh, who is a multifaceted entrepreneur, Iraq War veteran, and devoted father of 3 boys. His diverse career path includes notable achievements as a recording artist and a successful entrepreneur, each underscored by his deep-rooted faith, which guides all aspects of his life. After serving his country with distinction, Dwyan transitioned to the business world, where he has continued to apply the same dedication and excellence. Today, he is the founder of Marsh Magnify, a company dedicated to empowering other business owners by simplifying and enhancing their digital marketing efforts. His mission is to serve by helping businesses achieve their goals through innovative digital strategies, ensuring they can focus more on their passion and less on the complexities of technology. Dwyan, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Rachel. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And if there's one word or a few words you could use to describe how you are feeling today going into this recording, how would you describe that?
I am feeling grateful. That's the word that I use. That's the word that I start my day with most of the time, just in prayer and meditation, just grateful that I can open my eyes. Like I can open my eyes, but I can't make myself see. Like I have my ears, but I can't make myself hear, And so I know that some people didn't wake up this morning. So I'm always grateful just for the basics, being able to use my hands, my legs, my all my fingers and toes, and just seeing another day. So grateful is my word.
Some of the best advice I ever received is wake up each day in gratitude. And that is the best foundation to start your day with. So I'm so glad that you shared that. So glad to hear that you're feeling grateful going into this. And I am going to pass it off to you to share a little bit about yourself and your story with the listeners.
All right, perfect. So let's take it back to June of 2001. So I am walking to the recruiter's office. I bypassed the Navy. My mom was in the Navy, and I knew I didn't want to be in the Navy. And I bypassed the Army because I knew I didn't want to do that. And so I went to the Air Force recruiter. And he was saying like, hey, you don't have to deploy a lot, this and that. And so cool. So I go back home and in the delayed entry program, the DEP, for 3 months. And then 9/11 happens. And so I go in October of 2001. So that was my entry into the military. There were a lot of issues that happened then. My wife got pregnant, and then I had to go overseas. And so she was 7 months pregnant when I left, and my baby was born while I was overseas. So that was the start of the downturn of our type of, relationship. But just being in the military and learning a lot of things, being overseas a couple of times. I was in Iraq a few times. I was in Qatar, Kuwait, throughout my time. So I had a bunch of different deployments in the military. Then once I got out the military, I was able to kind of transfer into the business world. And there was one thing that I did learn just being in the military. My first base was North Dakota. And what they did up there was hunting and fishing. And I am a city kid from Los Angeles. And so I didn't know anything about hunting and fishing. But what I did realize was they invited me, but I was like, no, I'm not going. And what I did realize was the people who went on these hunting and fishing trips with the master sergeants and stuff like that, I was noticing that they were getting the TDYs that they wanted. They were getting the what we call senior airman below the zone when you put on rank early. They were getting just all of these things. And I was like, yo, what is going on? And so once I got out the military, I kind of realized that it's the relationships that you have that can propel you forward, not necessarily, just as a Black man in America, you always think, oh, it's the white man, it's the man holding me down. But I realized that that's not really a real thing. It's really about the relationships. And so when I got into the business world, one of the things that I made a point of was to understand the relationships. And the company that I was with, I was real chummy with the CEO, with the CEO's brother. I used to go to all the parties I was invited to, all the places I was invited to. And so, when the opportunities came around, I was one of the first people that they gave the opportunities to. And so, that's one of the things that I try to instill into my boys and into, people that I know is, relationships is really about relationship building and, making sure that people know who you are, because people want to do business with people that they know, that they know, like, and trust, and so that was a major, major lesson that I learned, from being in the military to being in the business world. And so after that, like I said, I was blessed with some opportunities and was able to have a brick and mortar store, a couple of brick and mortar stores for about 10 years. So I did that for a while. And then I moved into the digital marketing world, just wanting to help out other entrepreneurs. I've had a couple of different businesses, a couple of different entrepreneurial endeavors. And one thing that I noticed is that most entrepreneurs are great at what they do, but not really great at the marketing and, getting themselves out there and social media. A lot of entrepreneurs are like, yo, I don't want to be on social media. I don't want to post and I don't want to do this. But that's part of it. That's part of being in business, is going out there and getting the sales and getting the clients and making yourself known so that people can know, like, and trust you. Like I said, people want to do business with people who they know, like, and trust. And so just taking those lessons that I learned from the military to the business world and now just helping out other business owners is where I'm at now.
I love that. I love the focus on relationships, because I think a lot of people would have looked at a situation like that and said, oh, well, they're just getting the good end of the stick because of favoritism. Or I can't
Right.
remember how many conversations I overheard or probably even took part in. I did take part in those conversations of someone where I was like, oh, they're just, the favorite, and that's
Right.
why they're getting what they want, or that's why they're
Exactly.
advancing, right? And it's truly all about that mindset of, well, what are they doing that I'm not doing? And yes, I
Exactly.
get it. There is a fine line between sucking up and favoritism
Correct.
versus genuine relationship building. And
Correct.
there are people that do both. I'm not saying that it's all, everyone has good intentions and they're just trying to build relationships. But, how many of those things that I saw could have been an opportunity for me, or even anyone else listening to this, to look at it from a different perspective and say, okay, maybe instead of focusing on being bitter because I think that someone's getting the favoritism, maybe I
Right.
just focus on building better relationships. And
Right.
so love that perspective. I did want to dial it back a little bit, because you talked about how you kind of got thrust into this whole 9/11 thing.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you how that affected you as a person, how that affected your family, because that's not something easy, especially when you're not really expecting that, right? Because you joined right before all the chaos happened in the world.
Correct. Correct. And so how it affected my family, I think I touched on it just a little bit. I got married when I first came into the military. So I was about 20 years old,
Mhm.
2021, coming into the military. And like I said, we were both young kids from Los Angeles. Like I said, I'm a city boy, grew up in 90s LA, you know. And so our first base was Minot, North Dakota. And so that's like an hour away from the Canadian border. You know, it's up there, kind of isolation almost. As you said, the world had changed. The military had changed. Even when I went to boot camp, we were in Force Con D, I think it was. Like we were in Delta, which is a very high security measures is basically what that means. And so it was way different from how I envisioned my military career would be, because I came in during peacetime, or I signed up during peacetime. And I know that pretty much everybody that came in after 2001, it was like a 20-year war, you know. So
Yeah.
everybody was dealing with TDYs and you know, expecting to be gone and things of that nature. So as I said, it really affected my family in the sense of, you know, there's already a high divorce rate in the military. There's a high marriage rate, but there's also a high divorce rate in the military. But we succumbed to that, you know, just because of, you know, wasn't there for my son's birth. You know,
Yeah.
I had to get flown back a couple of times actually, because when my son was in the hospital, I had to do the whole Red Cross thing on one of my deployments and, you know, kind of come back a little early. The first one I couldn't because my son was born 3 days after George Bush declared war. And so they were telling me the whole time, like, hey, you're going to be able to go home. You're going to be able to go and see your son, you know, get born. And like I said, George Bush declared war, and my son was on the 19th, I believe, and my son was born on the 21st of March. And so it just didn't happen. And so it kind of deteriorated my marriage from that point, just because there's a lot of bitterness there, you know, and I know that it wasn't necessarily my fault or her fault or anything like that. But, you know, there was a lot of bitterness, there was resentment. We were young, as I said. And so it was hard to deal with that kind of stuff, you know, and to be honest, I'm still dealing with it. My son is 21 now, and, you know, we still have our issues, you know, just because of the, you know, the abandonment issues, the resentment issues, you know, they trickle down sometimes from, you know, mother to son or from generation to generation. And so, yeah, it's definitely being in the military has definitely affected my family for sure. And my mental health for sure.
Yeah, I was going to ask how you coped with all that, because that's a lot of changes. I mean, the military in general, joining even during peacetime, is a lot of changes, especially when you're moving from city to Midwest where people are hunting and fishing, right? Like that
Right.
alone is a
Right.
lot on the human psyche. And then you
Correct.
throw in war and like all these different realities that didn't meet up to what expectations were. How did you cope with all that?
You know, God really, you know, we found a we found a church out there in the middle of nowhere. You know, the base on Minot is about 13 miles from the actual city town of Minot. I don't know if it's a city. There's like one Walmart and Applebee's
Yeah.
is the fanciest restaurant, at least at the time. Maybe they've gotten fancier since I left, but Applebee's was, you know, our celebration restaurant, you know. But you know, just you know, trying to stay connected to my faith and connected to God during that time. It was a lot, as you said, you know, two city kids in the Midwest dealing with 10-foot snow drifts, you know, wasn't used to that at all. My wife at the time definitely wasn't used to that. And, you know, she didn't have any friends, anybody to really lean on at that time. And so we were both kind of isolated in the cold tundra, you know, for lack of better words. And so, yeah, it was a difficult time for sure. We were there for 3.5 years, so it was a difficult time. I try to remember the good times, but I do remember, you know, the difficult times, and
Yeah.
you know, the things that got me through was just my faith, really, and trying to lean on that to the best of my understanding at that time.
Yeah, I think it's important to reflect on both the good and the bad. Like, yes, you
Mhm.
don't want to live in the world of negativity, but
Correct.
at the same point, if the bad doesn't happen, then we don't become who we are today. And so it's almost like it's weird appreciation for the negative. That's at least what I've been kind of going through in my life lately, is
Nice.
looking back in this form of reflection, not to live in the negative, but to appreciate the bad times that shaped who I am today. And I think for me, at least, that makes it a lot easier to look back at the bad and say, okay, well, if that didn't happen, I would not be who I am or where I am today. And so that had to happen in my life, as much as some of it might be really awful to think about. I was curious, you had
Mhm.
mentioned kind of the expectation versus reality, what you expected joining the military. Did you have a difficult time with the reality not meeting up to your expectation?
I, I I did, but I mean, it was such a big change and a big jump from when I signed up to get into the military to when I actually got into the military. Now, full disclosure, my mother was in the Navy, and when I was in high school, she made me join what's called the Sea Cadets.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had gone to boot camp, as a high schooler and kind of done all of that. So I was very familiar with how it's supposed to go. So it was very easy for me in that sense. But my main question when I walked into the recruiter's office was, how long am I gonna have to go on these TDYs? Am I gonna have to go on TDYs? Because as I said, my mother was in the Navy and they are gone for 6 months out the year,
Mm-hmm.
just ever since I was a little kid. She's always been gone half the year.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want that for myself. So that was my main thing, was not, going on TDY. It's like, oh no, you don't have to go on deployment unless you want to. We kind of pull straws for deployments, and you can kind of do it whenever you kind of want to. You don't really have to do it. And then 9/11 happened, and now we out of here,
Right.
and so that's kind of part of life now, for even for the Air Force, as it wasn't before. In the
Yeah.
Army, yeah, Navy, yeah, Marines, yeah, but in the Air Force, that really wasn't part of life during peacetime.
Right.
So it was definitely I wouldn't say shock. It was just more of a, man, now I have to deal with this,
Right.
like now I'm here and now I have to deal with this. And
Right.
so, yeah, it was definitely difficult from how I envisioned my life was going to be. But, when does anything that we envision, come out exactly how we thought it was going to
Right.
be?
Right.
Life happens, and it's like, oh well, I thought it was going to be this, now it's that, now you got to roll with the punches.
Right.
So
Great skill to have as an entrepreneur, by the way. So I guess
100%,
that
100%.
skill served you well. What was your job in the Air Force?
I was in fuel, so I
Mhm.
fueled the planes, and I worked at a B-52 bomber base. And so when we're talking about fuel, we're talking about like 300,000 pounds worth of fuel. And
Right.
so you're out there for 2-3 hours fueling a plane when it's negative whatever degrees outside. And
Right.
so that was an experience all in itself.
So when you deployed, did you ever have to deal with anything difficult as far as, seeing combat or anything, or were you just more in that support role and didn't have to see a whole lot of combat operations?
Yeah, so I was more in a support role for the most part. Most of us in the Air Force stayed on the bases that we were deployed at. I will share that the first night of my first deployment, we found out that, well, we later found out that it was our armory that blew up. So what they used to do, I'm sure you're familiar, but what the townspeople used to do is they used to set up mortars and they used to shoot them in the air, and
Mhm.
basically they don't know where it's going to hit. They're just shooting them at the base, and
Yeah.
it'll land on the base somewhere,
Yeah.
anywhere. This particular night, the mortar actually landed in our armory. And so it blew up all of the ammunitions that we had on base that were confiscated. And so we're talking the very first night of my very first deployment, we're in bunkers because it's mushroom clouds going up. I mean, it looked like a movie. Like
Wow.
seriously, it looked like a movie. Like things were pew pew pew. I'm seeing
Wow.
Marshall Cloud. Like at the time, I thought we were getting attacked. I mean, I guess that wasn't attacked, but we didn't know what was going on, so we had to, put all the gear and go inside the bunker and
Yeah.
things of that nature. And so we later, like I said, we later found out that the mortar hit the armory. But yeah, that was my introduction to. I was in Kuwait, so
Wow.
that was my introduction to Kuwait. Like the first night, literally the first night on
Wow.
duty.
Wow.
That happened. So yeah, that was pretty traumatic. But for the most part, I stayed on base. I did have a bunch of Army guys who I knew that would go out. They would tell me stories of how they're knocking on doors and how they have to do stuff. One of my friends lost his leg while he was out there, and so I feel for them. But thank God that wasn't my position.
Yeah, I think it's for the people that didn't serve in the military, it's important to note that not everyone that goes over to the Middle East is out there in combat operations, but it doesn't mean that it negates anyone's experiences. Cause like you said, you knew people that lost limbs and,
Mhm.
were in it too. And so, everyone's experience is a little different, but
Right.
it's always interesting to me hearing people's stories because I was Navy, but I never went out combat anything. I mean, the
Gotcha.
most Middle East I did was Bahrain.
Okay.
Which
Okay.
it's kind of close to some stuff. There were some times in history, I guess you could call it, that things were a little questionable in the world, but I never really
Mhm.
felt like I was in danger, I guess,
Gotcha.
for lack of a
Gotcha.
better word. But yeah, no, I'm glad that your experience was not in a state of complete fear the entire time. I
Right.
guess
Right.
a double-edged sword. The worst happened the first night you were there, and then the rest was mostly smooth sailing. So
Yeah,
um,
pretty much. Like that was probably the worst thing that I could ever imagine
yeah,
happening, you know what I'm saying? And
yeah,
so without, being on hand-to-hand combat. So yeah, so after that happened, I was aware, that could happen at any time. And so that kind of was, like I said, that was my like initiation into the game,
yeah,
and like you said, it was I wouldn't say smooth sailing, but it was definitely easier after
yeah.
that for
Did you
sure.
have to go to SEER training to go over there? Do you guys do
Yes.
that in the Air Force? Yeah.
Yes,
How
we
was
do.
that experience
Yes,
for
we
you?
do. It wasn't that bad. For my
Yeah,
experience wasn't that bad. As I said, like I kind of am a military, or not kind of, but I am a military brat, and so I
yeah,
kind of grew up around it a little bit, so I was very familiar with how things go.
yeah.
So that type of training and things like that, it wasn't
Yeah.
too bad.
Yeah, I think most people I talk to that go to SEER, they're like, it's not that bad. But you're looking at the pictures of them like before they went in and after, and it's like you lost like 30 pounds. They're talking about I ate an apple all week. Like it wasn't that bad. Okay. All
Right.
right. But no, I think that'd be cool to go through. I never did it, but I think it'd be an interesting experience. I did
Mm.
want to chat a little bit about your transition out of the military. How was that for you?
My transition was, so while I was in the military, towards the end of my career, I was doing a lot more with music, and we were promoting clubs. So my last duty station was in England.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
And so I was there for 5 years. And even a year after I got out, actually, too, I stayed an extra year because we were doing club promotions and we were bringing artists over from the US. So we brought over Neo, we brought over Lil Wayne in his heyday, we brought over Cassidy and uh, a bunch of like old school 90s artists. Like
Mhm.
we were bringing over artists from the US to the UK and entertaining the bases that were out there. We were running the clubs out there. And so that was kind of my transition from the military. Like I said, once I got out, I actually stayed over there and continued to run the clubs and stuff for another year. And so that was a pretty good transition. That was kind of like my first foray into marketing and being out there. I was passing out flyers and things of that nature. Then we graduated to sending out text messages, automated text messages to the people in our area for events. And so that was really my transition from military to the business world, before I came back to the States.
So you already kind of started doing what you were going to do next while you were still in, and then just kind of continued it.
And just kind of continued it. I didn't realize that that's what I was doing at the time.
Yeah.
It was just that's just who I was. And
Yeah.
so I was doing it. I had, a couple of partners and we were doing it together. And looking back, I didn't realize that that's what I was doing and not everybody else was doing that same
Yeah.
thing. It
Yeah.
was because I was just in it, and so we
Yeah.
had people and blah, blah, blah. And so, I talked to some of my friends that are still in the UK and they're like, yo, since you guys left, it's way different, nobody's throwing parties, like even the taxi cab drivers. One of my partners, his father-in-law, he married a British citizen, and
Mhm.
his father-in-law owns a taxi cab company out there. And he said, man, when you guys were here, we had so much business. He was like, now, he was like, we just take people to the airport and that's it. He was like, our
Wow.
business really went down after we left. And I
Wow.
was like, wow, like I didn't realize that we were affecting the economy like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
business is good for not just you, it's good for everybody. So
Right, right. And that's really cool. When you talk about your transition experience, I think a lot of people feel like it's now I'm in the military and now I do something else. Not a lot of people are kind of blurring the lines and saying, okay, what can I do? And I know
right,
you weren't even really in this mindset. You were just kind of doing what you did, but like, what can I do while I am still active duty
right,
to help set me up, or maybe start and maybe learn and make the mistakes while there's still a little bit of that security blanket, and then
exactly.
just kind of morph into that. And it's interesting, you're not the first person I've talked to that started something while they were active that kind of translated into their next thing after they got out, and really worked out well for them. And so I think that's a really interesting thing to note for the listeners who are active duty and are really racking their brain about what do I do next? Because I hear a lot of people that are really scared of what the
Mhm.
next step is after they get out, because it is very black and white. Like, okay, today I am a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine. And then day after, I have to figure out the next
I have
thing.
to figure out the next thing. So one
Right.
of the things that I think that the military has done that wasn't around when I got out. So this year, the over the last 2 or 3 years, people that I came in with around the 2001, 2003 era, they're starting to retire, right? It's
Yeah.
it's the 20-year mark. And so I have a lot of friends that are retiring now. And so what they're doing is the skill bridge, which
Mhm.
is really cool because you have that 6 months to be able to kind of figure out a job or try a job. Or one of my friends, he worked at Disney for 6 months. One of my friends, he worked at a school as a ROTC instructor, and now he actually starts his job as his full-time job as a ROT instructor in a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
so it's the military has added the skill bridge, and I think that that's a really good thing for people who don't know what they want to do to use that, excuse me, benefit as a transitional thing. So because like you said, going from one day I'm in and the next day
Mhm.
I'm out, can be very scary.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I know the Navy's added some parameters around SkillBridge, but it is still a thing and really an awesome resource to just explore something different. Another thing that I think is really awesome to explore is for people who do want to get into the world of business or
Mhm.
being an entrepreneur. Being active duty, I think, is the perfect time to start exploring that. I wish that I had done more with business while I was active and had a little of that security blanket, because it would have given me the room to feel like I could invest into certain aspects of business and,
Right.
do all these certain things that I wasn't able to do right after I got out that I could have built at that time. And so I think that's really, really awesome that there are options, but also just stressing that point of try something while you're in. And
Yes.
even if you can't commit full time to it now, you can do something, and
Right.
something is better than nothing.
Something.
And yeah, and that's where a lot of people's success lies. So you got out, you were in the music world. Did I say earlier in your bio that you were a recording artist as well?
Correct. Correct.
Tell us about that.
Um, it was fun. Um, yeah, so like I said, when I was in England, we did a lot of music, we did a lot of shows. To be honest, we really started promoting shows and clubs so that we could open up for these artists, that we were bringing over. And then it kind of rolled into more of a business than anything else. But yeah, when I came back, I really went hard into music. I went to music school for a year. and got my audio engineering degree and worked in a bunch of studios and worked with a bunch of artists. I was signed for a little bit, but ultimately, I came back to the business world. That was kind of where my skill set lies. And so I did that. I still do music. I still put out music. I still have songs that are on film and TV soundtracks and things of that nature. So I still get some checks from music, but it's more of a hobby side hustle type of thing instead of my full time.
So you've done a lot of really big things with your life so far up to this point that a lot of people might look at from the outside and say like, wow, that's incredible. How does one even get started in that? Who were some of your biggest mentors throughout your journey? Or I guess, how did you, I know you said relationships. So
Hmm.
how did you tap into these areas that you've gotten into with your life and business so far?
You said it. It's really relationships. I'm gonna be that's really what it is. It's just networking, people that you know, putting it out there what you do so that when people know somebody who knows somebody, they can say, "Oh, I know this person does that," and get connected. Just really how I met my manager was my next door neighbor invited me out to like a BET party or something. And she was like, "Yo, this is my neighbor. He's really dope. He's a really dope rapper and woo wop." And he came to my apartment right after the party, and I played him some records, and he was like, "Yo," and then we were in business together. So
Yeah.
it was really just one relationship leads to the next relationship. And so, like I said, that's why I started with that story, because I didn't even realize it until I got out of the military, the things that I missed,
Mhm.
because I had that mentality like, why are they playing favorites? Why are they, oh man, it's because there's some white dudes, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? They're
Uh-huh.
cooking up and blah blah blah. And I had that mentality. And when I got out of the military, I realized I said, no, that's not what it is. It's relationships,
Yeah.
And so I really made it a point to be everywhere I could. When I got out the military, I literally moved to Hollywood, and I lived right off of Hollywood Boulevard for 3 years, because I wanted to be in the mix. Like I was in walking distance to all the clubs, all the hottest clubs, all that kind of stuff. I was around other musicians, I just really was intentional. And that's what I like to tell, people that I work with, like, look, you have to be intentional about what you're doing. And once you are intentional and you are putting yourself out there and you're creating these relationships, nothing's going to happen overnight. But, the energy that you put out is the energy that you're going to get back. Just
Yeah.
go unto others as you would like them to do to you. Like this, it's the cardinal rule, karma, whatever you want to call it. It's in the Bible, doing to others. And it's just as you're putting that energy out, it's going to start coming back to you, tenfold. And
Right.
so, that's why I never hesitate to do things for people, or never hesitate when somebody asks me for a favor or asks me for something. I'm always willing to give a hand, because I know that it's going to come back to me,
Yeah.
tenfold. And
Right.
so really that's the secret. That's the key. I didn't do anything super special. As you're saying it, like, people think it's wow. Like to me, it's, just regular because it's just my
Yeah.
life. But all I can say is be intentional about what your goals are, what your end goal is. Start with the end in mind, and get out there and talk to people and create relationships and really care, because people can know if you're, like you said, brown nosing, or
Mhm.
trying to play favorites or whatever, but like really really care about other people, and they will care about you.
I love that you said know where you're going and then go from there, because a lot of people, I ask a lot of people, what is your purpose in life? Especially when I'm talking to people that are transitioning out of the military. And a
Mhm.
lot of people have no idea where they're
Right.
even headed. And so, how can you be intentional with something if you don't even know what you want or where you're headed to, which
Mhm.
can change depending on what season of life you're in? And so, I'm really
Correct.
glad that you hit on that specific point. Was there one mentor that really helped you throughout your journey, or has it just been kind of a culmination of the relationships you've built along the way?
Yeah, I will not say that I've had a actual mentor
Mhm.
that I can call back on and be like, this person has walked me through every stage of life.
Yeah.
It's mostly just been relationships for me. Now I'm seeking out mentors and mentorship because I know that, I'm trying to break to the next level. So as you go to the next level, but on every level, I've met somebody who was where I wanted to be at that time. And so, they kind of mentored me at that time on where I wanted to be. And so, like I said, it was just me seeking out relationships and me asking questions and me talking to people, and that's kind of been how I've led my life.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's important to note that there will be people along the way in different parts of our journey
Hmm.
to get us through or help us through that part of the journey. And it's not always just one person, and that's okay too.
Right, right.
Huh.
Yeah, it's not always just one person. I mean, like I say, you want to be around like-minded people,
Yep,
and once you're around like-minded people, then you'll figure it out.
absolutely. Talk to us about your business that you have now.
Yeah, so now as I said, I am on a mission to serve other entrepreneurs, make it easy for them as far as their marketing strategies and their business strategies. What I'm realizing now is there's a lot of entrepreneurs or people who want to start businesses, but just don't know where to start. Don't know how to file for EIN or get their LLC up and all that kind of stuff. So I'm creating a course for that for those individuals. But my actual business, like I said, is coaching people and getting them to where they need to be in their marketing and social media strategies.
That's awesome. And I think it's important to note that this is what I love about having entrepreneurs that are veterans on the podcast is that you probably, when you're active duty, you're probably not thinking, I'm going to get out of the military and start a business that's going to be really successful. Or I'm probably not thinking I'm going to get out of the military and get into the music world or anything like that. Right. But I've talked
Right,
to so many people who have done things that if they had sat down with that career counselor and said, yeah, I'm going to get out of the military and I'm going to be a rapper, that
right,
career counselor probably would have laughed in their face.
right.
And so just you being here and showing people what is possible, I think is huge because without seeing that, it's just kind of an idea and a dream and in a lot of active duty military's head. And sometimes it keeps them down at that level when their potential is way up here and
Mm-hmm.
they're keeping themselves down here. And so I just appreciate you sharing that vision of what is possible with the people who are listening to this and really need to hear that. Where can people find you? How can we support you?
So you can find me on my YouTube. As I said, I'm creating some content to help entrepreneurs out on my YouTube, which is Marsh Magnify. You can go to marshmagnify.com if you are a business owner and you need some help with your automation, with your marketing, anything of that nature. We can help you out. Got a team of people that can help you out. I think I talked to you about, being able to have automations when you're scheduling things, it
Yep.
kind of makes it easier being able to follow up with your potential clients and things of that nature is very important. So setting up that automation and getting that going is something that I want to do for you and for other entrepreneurs out there.
I don't think I realized how important systems are in business until a year or two of trying to like do the action piece before the systems piece. And it is so hard because it really creates so much extra busy work that
Yep.
is really hard to keep up with
Right.
if the automations are not there. So I don't think it really fully dawned on me how important it is to invest money, time, whatever into setting up the systems to make life easier down the road. So I will definitely be talking to you and your team more about that because I'm in need. And then hopefully anyone listening that is considering business, or even if you're in business, definitely check it out. If you are not in business or you are not considering starting a business, please still share this episode and share this information with your network because you never know who in your own network might need this information, which is incredibly, incredibly valuable in this busy world of social media where AI is, outworking all these people, and it is hard to really keep up. So automation in general is
Yeah.
huge.
I like to say it's a tool.
Yeah.
There was a time where there was a job out there that shoveled poop off of the ground from the horses,
Yep.
but that job is no longer because now we have cars,
Yes.
and so there's always going to be new technology and things of that nature, but you definitely just want to use it. They're just tools, to help you be more productive. And as you were saying, just helping you to set up a system so you don't have to keep doing the repetitive tasks that take up so much of your time, take up
Absolutely.
so much of your time, and you'd rather be working on your business, as we all would.
Yes. And please let us know when your course launches to help people that are wanting to set up business, because that I know is something that's really needed. I see people all the time asking about just the basics of getting into business, which can be really overwhelming for a lot of people. So
Yeah,
please
Candace.
let us know when that launches so we can share it. And
No, I will. I will. I'm glad to hear you say that. Like I said, people have approached me about it. And if people are approaching you about it, then that means that there's a need. And as an entrepreneur, we're just here to solve problems.
yes,
And we're here to help, in whatever way we can. So if I can help in that area, then I will definitely do that and let you know once the course is done.
awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come share just a little bit of your story, share what you're doing, how you got to where you are today. It really is super inspiring for those serving currently, for those who are veterans, and then everyone in between. So thank you so much for
No
taking the
worries. Thank you.
time to be on the show. Are there any last words or piece of advice that you want to leave the listeners with today?
I just want to say I appreciate you for even having this platform. Thank you very much for having me on this platform. I'm grateful, as I said, and just want to leave with the listeners and viewers to make sure that you are intentional in the things that you are doing. Make sure that you are putting God first, and everything else will work itself out how it's supposed to.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. With your support, we are able to increase awareness of the mental health issues affecting service members and veterans today, with the goal of creating positive change. If you got value from this episode, please take 30 seconds to subscribe and share this episode within your own network. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.